Well, welcome to Round the Table with Christian Concern, the first one of 2022. I'm delighted that we've got Andrea Williams, our Chief Executive, here with us today, and special guest Nadia Eweida, who had a very important case that was run with the Christian Legal Centre some years ago that set very important precedents for us. So I'm hoping Andrea and Nadia will pop up on the screen very, very shortly, and we can talk about those cases. Hi, Andrea, and hi, Nadia. Very nice to see you. Thank you for joining us today. So, Andrea, why don't you introduce Nadia, because you were involved in the case at the time?
Only at the very beginning. I mean, I think that's one of the things that was quite extraordinary about Nadia as a person, is that I would say this now, I mean, this case, because your case, doesn't it, Nadia, goes all the way back to 2006.
That's correct.
It's a seminal case. It's called the British Airways cross case. You just say that in any room in this country, pretty much, and most people know exactly what you are talking about. And
over a certain age, it should be said, perhaps, yeah.
So
most people over a certain age, perhaps one should say.
Yes, that's correct.
But certainly I remember it, and I know many people remember this case, the British Airways cross case. It was a very, very high-profile case at the time, got huge amounts of media attention, and Nadia Eweida was the lady at the centre of it all.
She was, and that's why it's so wonderful and such a privilege to have Nadia with us today. And I remember early on in the case, when British Airways actually changed their uniform policy, about a year after Nadia had said that she wouldn't take off her cross, or she wouldn't make invisible her cross. And let me just say, visibility of the cross in all of the cross cases. The visibility of the cross has been one of the key arguments in the courtroom. Make the cross invisible, everyone says. And the visibility of the cross was was a major issue going back right to the very beginning. And when BA reversed its uniform policy, I remember saying at the time to Paul Diamond, who was counsel at the beginning with Nadia, I remember saying, well, that's a win. And I remember Nadia saying, there's a point of principle here. And that's really how I want to set it up, because to say that now here we are, what is it? It's 14, 15 years later. And we've got the importance of your case and the context of your case across manifestation of faith, being able to wear symbols of faith, what the cross actually means. Your case is the start of that, and it's the jurisprudence around which so many of our cases have been argued when it comes certainly to visible manifestation of faith.
So can we take a step back though, Nadia, and just tell us, for those, there will be some people who don't know your case, okay, who are listening here or watching here. Tell us what happened to you and how this all became an issue for you.
Initially, we report for duty. We signed in saying we're present, and one of the managers said, "What is this?" I said, "It's my cross."
We might have just lost Nadia there a little bit. So Nadia was working as an air stewardess on British Airways. That's right, isn't it? And she wanted to wear a cross on her uniform. Just a little necklace cross like she's wearing now, although you can't see it very clearly now. And it was important for her. It was a confirmation cross. Is that right, Andrea?
Yes, it was a cross that she held very dear. She didn't want to remove it. She felt that it was important as an expression of her faith. I'm sorry that we've actually lost Nadia for the moment. Her connection was really excellent before we came live on air, and I think it would be great to hopefully to get her back on, and then to get Nadia herself to tell us her story. But I think that
the latest one was Shirley Chaplin. Why don't you talk about that one?
Yes,
that was around the same time. Andrea, wasn't it?
Shirley Chaplin, her case started 4 years later, in fact, and she was a wonderful, faithful nurse who'd worked down in Exeter with the trust down there. She'd worked for 30 years, and her cross was very specifically a confirmation cross that she had never taken off. And she was I know that she won't mind me saying this, she's just a very quiet lady with a quiet faith, but this cross meant so much to her, and the outworking of her faith was very much the way in which she loved and served her patients in the hospital. Being a nurse was such a vocation to her, and a job which she absolutely loved, and was her expression of faith. And then when the Devon and Exeter Trust changed their uniform policy, they asked that Shirley Chaplin to remove her cross. They didn't want to be able to see her cross. We were then as the years went by, or as before the case came to court, we sought to negotiate with the trust, because it moved from, first of all, them saying that it should not be visible and to take it off, to saying, well, this is becoming to be a health and safety risk. You could be strangled, someone could be hurt. And so it became this cover up of the cross became one of the central planks of argument. Another one of the arguments in her case became that the cross itself was not a Christian symbol. And I remember in the case of Shirley Chaplin that we were refused to put in evidence in the early stages of the case from Bishop Michael Nazir Ali, in fact, at the time, to say theological evidence to say that the cross was a Christian was a Christian symbol. And
so
actually,
I gather we've got Nadia back on the line now.
Wonderful.
So I hope she can.
My laptop is playing up. I don't know what happened, so I'm on my mobile. So.
Well, great. You're looking great anyway. So perhaps we can go back just to your story then. You were working for British Airways. You turned up one day and somebody asked a question about your cross.
Yes, and I said, it's my cross, it's my faith. And I was told to remove it because it wasn't uniform standards. And I was, I went into a side room, and there were other colleagues coming in, reporting for duty, wearing a hijab, Sikh bangle, and I was sort of made to look, to stand out, sort of like an oddbod. Then one of the duty managers came down, and I said, if you want to remove it, you have to remove it yourself. In other words, I dared her to touch me, which she did, because she went away and came back with the lanyard, put the lanyard around my neck, removed my lanyard and exchanged it with another lanyard, and then put my cross, which I had on, and shoved it down my shirt and my front. So she did touch me. There were no union reps around at about 5 a.m. or 5:30, very early morning shift. So I was basically humiliated, really. And I went to see Dr. Vincent Cable, my then MP, and he took the case up. And then I was advised to write in appeals to wear the cross, and permission was not granted. So it started maybe up until September. And then Dr. Vincent Cable said, "Are you ready?" And I didn't know what I was ready for. And he'd notified the media, and they took a great interest. So that's how it started. And then it went worldwide, really.
I mean, isn't that amazing, really, that it was your MP that yes, put you into the centre of, in a sense, of a media storm? And I think that that's interesting, isn't it? And it really did captivate the media, but that then Nadia was at the centre of a global story around British Airways essentially wanting the cross to be removed.
Yes, or visibly out of sight, and now it's
visibly out of sight. Yeah.
I was offered a job behind the scenes in cargo where I couldn't be seen, and I refused it because that was not the job I was employed to do. And their argument was they couldn't put a hijabbed person behind the scenes because that's not the job they were employed to do. They had a lot of finicky rules which excluded the cross. And at one point, I was stalked, and emails were sent. Managers were emailing each other, and I have sight of that, to say, if you see her wearing the cross, take action, take immediate action. So I was being haunted or stalked as I was, going around doing my duties. And then another time, again, I have sight of that, is that from their legal team to their employment team, they're talking about the cross, because it was rumored that I was wearing a big cross like the Archbishop, like a big, very big.
3
Do you have
inches or
the
something
same
like
cross
that.
on now, Nadia? Do you have the same cross on now? Do you have the same cross
Yes.
on now?
Yes, yeah.
Would be great. Yeah, so there's the cross. And they didn't make a health and safety argument about this, did they? It was a visibility argument.
It was a visibility argument, and it started off in the sense that it started off like equal opportunities, fair play. Where they manifest their faith, I can manifest my faith. But it turned into a religious discussion with people who were not theologians or clerics, to say the cross is not necessary. Christians don't need to wear a cross. You see?
And this became one of the main arguments. Yeah.
Yeah, and when they were arguing it, they were anti at the time. I don't know if they still are, but they were anti-Christian, because the emails from their legal to their employment says it doesn't matter whether it was a big cross or a small cross. The point is she was wearing a cross, end of. So that was the point. They did not want me to be wearing a cross. So it was quite, I suffered nosebleeds, ad hoc nosebleeds every now and then, without prompting to have nosebleeds. And it was quite stressful at times.
But Nadia, as a result of the public pressure, in many ways, as a result of you taking a stand in the public pressure, BA did reverse that uniform decision, didn't they? And
they did. As I said, it was a business directive.
Yes.
And they allegedly said that their phone lines had crashed. Everything had crashed because people were outraged. So I had a lot of support from colleagues and a lot of support, from the public. And I dare not say, and because that's reality, is where two or more are gathered, I am present. I had plenty prayers and supplications, and I prayed and I fasted, and I did, I jumped hoops and did whatever was necessary, really. I fought with God, like Jacob, held on to him. I said, you can't leave me until you bless me. And if you are the Son of God and you're Jesus and you were crucified, it's not my case, it's your case, because I'm not denying you. So you said you're not going to deny me if I acknowledge you. And if I lose, it'll be your loss, not mine. So I was really sort of bold and sort of arrogant in a sense, really.
And I can see people are watching live are commenting, and do send through your comments if you've got them. But just one here from Francis. I think she says she's from Gibraltar. Anyway, bless you for your boldness. So encouragements today as well from people watching now, Nadia. So what about in court, Andrea? Where did it go then? It went to court, did it as well?
Well, I think one of the interesting things for me, and history has shown that Nadia, in terms of her boldness and her great sense of injustice and the fact that there had been offence at the cross. I remember that when BA reversed the decision, I remember myself thinking this is a time to settle, but I'd like to perhaps bring Nadia back in at this point, because I think it would be great to hear with the eyes of history how it was, Nadia, that you then you didn't feel that was sufficient and decided to pursue the claim against the British Airways. Perhaps you could just tell us how you were feeling at that time, because many would have viewed that many would say that you have won your cross at that time. Why did you take it? Why did you then take it up as a point of discrimination into the employment courts? Was I think that's a great thing to hear from you as the person that was really living through it at the time. And I believe, the thing is, I can say that I held that opinion at the time, but you're the one who's been proved right, because actually as I've said already, your case became seminal.
Well, it was at the very, very beginning when it first started, and I was getting ready to go to work, and I had my cross on and my uniform shirt, and I looked in the mirror and I said, if I'm going to do this, Jesus, I have to do it properly. I can't be messing about, because this is God, supreme faith and the creator, my creator and my savior. So when it was okay for me to go back to work and it was a business directive, I had messages, or I had advice, let them think you won. Well, let them think you won is incorrect, because even although I won going back to work, initially they did it as a business directive. They did not yet acknowledge that Christians have the right to manifest their faith like other colleagues. And I had Christian comment saying, well, Jesus is in your heart, you don't have to. I said, no, I have to. Why? Because if I see a Muslim woman wearing a hijab and one not wearing a hijab, I will know immediately that the person wearing the hijab is a Muslim and she's following her faith, whereas the other one could either be following her faith or not following her faith. So this is how I took it, because I was the radar. I was working in a multicultural environment, supposedly with diversity and inclusion, and I was watched. So I had to stand up for my faith and trust Jesus.
So I think at this point, really, what we were seeing there that there was a business directive that essentially reformulated the uniform policy so that Nadia could wear her cross, but there wasn't an admission that she had been discriminated against as a result of the wearing of her cross. And really, this discriminatory point of the discrimination against Christians and the lack of respect or regard or acknowledgement that the cross was a Christian symbol within that workplace context was then what Nadia pursued through the courts. And Nadia, this took 7 years, didn't it? Because you lost in the domestic courts. And it was a number of judges.
I lost every court.
Yes. I think it was something like 13 judges in total did not acknowledge that the cross was a Christian
I lost in all the courts in the United Kingdom.
Yes. And then it took...
Sorry, Andrea, I can't hear you.
Yes. I'm so sorry about the connection, Nadia. We were doing so well. Are you able to hear me now? Yes. Wonderful. But actually, it was in Strasbourg that there...
Yes.
There the judges acknowledged that Nadia had been discriminated, that there had been a violation of Article 9, her freedom to manifest faith, and that the interference had been disproportionate, that she had been that the cross was a Christian symbol, and this was really highly significant, and has been used ever since in terms of framing the Article 9 and its reach, the freedom to manifest faith and its reach. But that took 7 years to get there, didn't it? Losing in every court scenario. Nadia, I think she may have frozen again.
That's correct. I say that the idea is to stand up and be counted for Christ and to be a witness. So it wasn't a matter of all legal jargon and, the law says this or the law says that, but it had to be seen as a personal relationship of faith between God and his creation or being, as myself. So, I did forward the European Court of Human Rights, as well as the Employment Tribunal, a DVD called The Cross by Arthur Blessed, and his journey with the cross. He went around the world carrying his cross. So it had to be noted that it was in simplicity, very serious, but in simplicity, Jesus you have a relationship with God, and you carry on best you can.
And I think this was actually the first time that the UK was found in breach of the European Convention on Human Rights. An extraordinary thing, right? Because it wasn't allowing Christians to manifest their faith by wearing a little cross necklace. And it's extraordinary as well, isn't it, Andrea, that the UK government lawyers actually argued in court that the cross is not a Christian symbol.
Yes, I mean, to imagine that, in 2013, 2014, the UK lawyers were actually arguing that the cross was not a Christian symbol and that it was jewelry. To the idea that that it could not judicial notice in the English courts in the UK jurisdiction had not taken judicial notice that the cross was a Christian symbol. This was happening. This was the shift in English jurisprudence. So something that would have just been accepted historically was no longer being accepted in the courts. But it wasn't even that it wasn't being accepted. It was actively being argued against. And David Cameron was the Prime Minister at the time. But it was an extraordinary state of affairs, but also that very few people within our country or even within the Christian constituency either understood the importance of it in terms of freedom, how far it might reach, or really could believe what was actually being said. And so again, the profile of Nadia and his case was really important from that perspective. I think the Nadia's trying to come in there.
Well, under Cameron, I can't remember who was the Attorney General. What's his name? I can't remember his name. And I went and had a meeting with him. And it was just before going to the European Court of Human Rights.
Dominic Grieve, was it Dominic Grieve?
Yeah. Are you accepting to change? Because David, it's Dominic Grieve. I went to see Dominic Grieve. Yeah, Grieve. Anyway, David Cameron was very supportive of the cross case publicly, but when it came to the crunch, he backed down because he had the opportunity to change legislation to say Christians can be allowed to wear crosses. And I went to see Dominic Grieve, and he in the case anyone can wear anything, or very flippant he was. So in the end, we did proceed to the European Court of Human Rights because David Cameron was given the opportunity to back up his public statement of supporting the cross.
And Andrea, it's not about anyone can wear anything.
A lot of attempts.
Yeah. So, because Andrea, I can see someone here, Wayne Morrow,
but
I think, saying,
that is what I was told, really.
Yeah. Does it open the door to people wearing all sorts of things, or tattoos, or studs on earrings, or whatever? Is that what it's all about? It's not about that, is it, Andrea? What's it about?
Well, I think that we find in most workplaces today, that nobody would bat an eyelid at a tattoo. You've just because you mentioned a tattoo there, Tim, and actually everyone looks at tattoos today in our culture as symbols of what's important to the person. That's quite an interesting thing, isn't it? Just in terms of our societal shift, in terms of people very often say, well, this tattoo means this, and those that are receiving them will listen to it, and it's often of sentimental importance, and and employers are usually sympathetic to that. What was and of course, just generally in life, we're not advocating for a massive free-for-all in terms of how people are dressed in order to go. There's a reason to have uniforms and corporate image. And of course, we don't want to undermine uniforms, corporate discipline, the image. Those things are, of course, very important. We understand that in terms of how companies project themselves. But that is one balance. That's one part of the.
It's about proportionality, isn't it, Andrea? When you've got people wearing hijabs and wearing turbans and wearing bangles or whatever else it might be, and then they're not allowed to wear a cross, then there's clearly discrimination going on, isn't there? And it's clearly unreasonable to say you can't wear this little cross when people can wear other symbols of faith.
And this has been particularly demonstrated, I think, very clearly in the nurse cross cases. So the case of Shirley Chaplin, where we had many photos of other staff in the Exeter Trust, in the Devon and Exeter Trust, we had many photos of the hijab being worn, of jewellery being worn, of jewellery over lanyards being worn. There was also a rule in that case whereby the Muslims were able to cover up their arms, whereas very often particularly in theatre and so on, the sleeves come up to elbow length or shorter. So there were all these sorts of irregularities when it came to other religions. But as regarded the little cross of Shirley, that became a great point of contention. And in the case of Shirley Chaplin, one of the most extraordinary things that the court decided without taking theological evidence was this, that the hijab was mandated in Islam to be worn. And they therefore had to permit for the hijab to be worn. But that because the cross was not a mandated symbol of Christianity, that accommodation should not be made for that, and that it posed a health and safety risk. Now, we proved categorically, absolutely clearly, on every front, that the cross did not pose a health and safety risk. The fact that it was made of silver meant that it would not cross-contaminate. That was highly unlikely. When they said that the cross needed to be able to be unclasped quickly, we offered to change the lock of the cross so that if it got pulled in any way, it would just slip away. None of these measures were considered good enough for the employer at that time. They wanted the cross to become invisible. The extraordinary measure then of the government actually saying that the cross was not a Christian symbol. Shirley Chaplin going all the way with Nadia. Her case was joined to Nadia's case in the European Court of Human Rights, together with two other cases, that of Lillian Ladelli. You'll remember that she was the civil registrar who said that she would be unable in conscience as a Christian to civilly register 2 men or 2 women. And also we had the case of Gary McFarlane, who said he would be unable to give, he raised a query as to whether or not he would be able to give sex therapy to 2 men or two women. This was something that he simply raised a question of in training, and then he lost his position within Relate. They both argued, so as Shirley Chaplin and Nadia Eweida argued that the cross was a manifestation of their faith, so Gary McFarlane and Lillian Ladelli argued that believing in the Christian sexual ethic, that marriage was between one man and one woman, that this was something that was also a manifestation of their faith, and framed how they did their work. Now, within that context, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg said in its judgment clearly, and this has not been said in the United Kingdom, said that yes, it did flow as a result of freedom of religion from Article 9. It did flow that believing in marriage between one man and one woman was a Christian manifestation, was a Christian belief. So that was, and it could be manifested in work, in public. Now, this was actually a very strong step forward within English law at that point, because all the cases had gone against us on that point. But we now had a European judgment that recognized this as important and as a manifestation of faith. What the judges didn't do in Europe, however, although it was great that the case of Nadia won outright, well done to Nadia. But what they did with regard to the rest of the cases was to say it was a matter of proportionality. It was within the margin of appreciation, and that this should be left to the domestic court. So they didn't want to interfere with the decision of the domestic courts around health and safety, around their policies and practices within the workplaces, whilst, however, acknowledging that they believe that there had been an interference with Article 9, or that in fact, or that it was arguable, and that in fact the manifestations that we have been arguing were real, as against the Article 9 expression of them as a manifestation of faith. So it was really important judicial precedent, jurisprudence, not hard precedent, but became in the it then became part of the part of the conversation, yes, part of the public conversation, but also part of jurisprudential argument within the courtroom around which we went on to then argue many other cases.
Yeah. So now, Nadia, thank you so much for your stance, because it set a real foundation, I think, for where we are today, and a real foundation in law. And you fast forward to 2022, just last week, and we had the result of Mary Onuoha, a very similar case to Shirley Chaplin's case, wanted to wear a little cross, confirmation cross again, on her uniform as a nurse. Other people could wear hijabs and other things and so on, but she couldn't wear the cross, discriminated against. And then in this case, though, Andrea, they accepted evidence that the cross is a Christian symbol and a central importance in Christianity, and is very important, and an object of persecution in some countries. And some people feel in conscience as Christians they want to have a visible manifestation of their faith, and so all of that was accepted, and Nadia's case was cited in the judgment, was it not, as well as evidence for that, and as a precedent that ought to be listened to. And therefore, in the first round, you had, I don't know how many rounds you had, Nadia, of courts, all saying no, but in the first round, Employment Tribunal, they said yes, this is discrimination and harassment for being a Christian, and therefore Mary Onuoha won her case, and considerable thanks goes to Nadia and the others all those years ago who set these precedents in that.
Absolutely, and it was absolutely wonderful that Nadia contacted us to say well done, and again that just shows the care.
I'm very pleased.
Yes, I mean, to say around...
I was very pleased. I fasted and I prayed and I...
That's absolutely brilliant, but just, and there's no worries. It's just great to see you. I'm sorry we're having the connection trouble, but to say with regard to Mary, her battle was also a long one as well, but not so evidently in the courts, but with the NHS Trust down in Croydon. She could also have given up, but she said that she had to do this for the NHS, for other nurses like her, because she was first told to take off her cross in 2014. So we are, again, we are 7, 8, it's similar to you, Nadia, about 7 or 8 years. She refused to take it off. And then again, it went quiet, but in 2017, 2018, again, she was asked to take off her cross. And she was, again, just like Nadia, she was put behind the scenes. You can go and do filing. The same thing happened to Shirley Chaplin. Go and work behind the scenes. Go and do paper filing. Go and sit on the reception desk. Don't be a nurse. And in the case of Mary Onuoha, she's a very experienced theatre practitioner. Now, let me just say this. When she's absolutely in theatre, of course, she completely scrubs up. So she puts on the full lot of scrubs, which you have to do. But the rest of the time, she is there in a normal nurse's uniform with her cross that is visible. They were arguing continually the cross should not be visible, should be taken away, when we were able to produce a lot of evidence to show that lanyards were being worn, far more dangerous than the little cross. Other jewelry was being worn, dangly jewelry was being neckties, all of this was being worn. But some of the most, let me just read for you a few of the brilliant words in the judgment. These paragraph 181 of the judgment, you've got the cross is of central importance to Christianity. The cross is a symbol of Christianity. The church attaches particular importance to the symbolism of the cross. The symbolism of the cross plays a daily part in the devotional life of committed Catholics. There's a tradition of wearing a physical cross, which is a very long standing. The wearing of the cross is not and should not be simply seen as a fashion accessory. In some parts of the world, stopping Christians from displaying the cross has been a feature of wider persecution campaigns. 181:10, there's biblical teacher imploring Christians to be open about their faith and not to hide it. And I saw a wonderful comment here from Adrian, which said that it was because he was wearing a cross that someone actually approached him because they saw. She said she saw my cross and felt told to do so, as she would be safe if she approached. And that's exactly the kind of thing. And in a world that's hurting, I think that symbols are going to become increasingly important. In a world that no longer understands the importance of the cross, no matter what's your denomination. And it's true that, the Orthodox, Coptic, Catholics have long attached importance to the symbolism of the cross. But increasingly in a world, in the wearing of the cross, the visibility of the cross, but in a world that's entirely forgotten what the cross is and its importance, I think increasingly Christians will need to identify publicly in some way as being Christian in this country. The tribunal found that the NHS trust, that the hospital had directly discriminated or harassed Mary Onuoha because of her Christian religion or her manifestation of it. And it held that they had victimized her because she raised a grievance around it. And Nadia knew that, because Nadia stood up to them, because Nadia raised a grievance. So she then was harassed and victimized. This is the pattern. And I have to say this, that most people then stand down. Most people then stand down. And most people would have, in Nadia's situation, said, okay, they've changed their policy. I can wear my cross. I stand down. But because she had been victimized in the way that she had, because they had sought to remove the symbol, because it was purely a business decision, and the discrimination remained, and the lack of acknowledgement of the cross was done, she pursued it. And she has been vindicated. Also, what it means, the judgment in Mary Onuoha, is this: that the policy which prohibits the wearing of a small cross worn on a fine chain was in itself discriminatory. So a policy preventing that is in itself discriminatory. This series of finding the importance of wearing the cross for Christians is very important indeed. And the other thing that they did in Mary Onuoha's case, which I loved, was said common sense should apply. Yes, good old common sense. And it's as if in the case of Nadia and in the case of Shirley Chaplin and in the 7 years leading up, the way in which they treated Mary Onuoha. In the end, Mary Onuoha became a very strong woman, but she became sick through the anxiety of it all, through the pressure of it all. the pressure of it. Common sense would say you don't punish, you don't put behind closed doors, you work it out. They just weren't applying. They became so entrenched that they became insistent that the cross should be removed. So much.
And why
so
do you
that
think the cross was targeted in particular, Andrea or Nadia? You know, when they allow all these other things, then the cross is the one that they pick on in the end. Even a tiny little cross.
Well, let me tell you this. I mean, in the case of Mary Onuoha, one of the most
I think human beings.
Are we there, Nadia?
I think she might have frozen out, I'm afraid.
Yeah, one of the
I can't hear everything, but
one of the extraordinary things in the case of Mary Onuoha was that a surgery was interrupted to remove. Somebody was actually on the operating table, and a manager came in to remove Mary from that situation. She was actually at that point the nurse that was between the theatre, the aftercare, and the operating theatre, and an extraordinary set of events. What do I say, Tim, about the cross? It's because the cross has always been an offence, and and people become very entrenched around it. It doesn't make it doesn't make sense to understand it in any other way.
Listen, Nadia, we want to really thank you, and I know many of the people viewing as well have expressed their thanks to you for your stance, for your uncompromising stance, for your strength in the Lord, the strength that the Lord gave you to take this stance and to lose and lose and lose and lose and lose and lose and lose before finally winning and setting a remarkable precedent and a historic judgment that still has repercussions to this day, and has had repercussions only last week in Mary Onuoha's case as well. So we're so grateful for that, and your legacy lives on and will continue to live on. We love it. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Andrea, as well. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found that an inspiring conversation as I did. And look forward to see you again same time next week. Also on Monday night, 8 p.m, we have Professor Jonathan Burnside joining us for a very illuminating talk, Why Bother with Biblical Law? So do watch out for that and join us for that. We'll have live Q&A with him afterwards as well. So we're looking forward to that as well. And see you next week. Thank you very much.